"Sirs, that boy lived with me in the orphanage." Her voice echoed through the grand hall, trembling, raw and desperate. The chandelier lights glimmered above, but her eyes were fixed on the portrait, an elegant oil painting of a smiling child around 7 years old, dressed in a navy blazer. A child who, according to every story in that mansion, had died many years ago. Her name was Eliza Hartwell, a quiet, soft-spoken housekeeper who had spent most of her adult life trying not to be seen. Working floor to floor in the Westbourne estate, an old colonial mansion in Savannah, Georgia, Eliza carried her past like a shadow she never talked about. She never raised her voice. She never caused trouble. She was simply there, invisible as polished silver and dusted marble. But today, something inside her broke open. The portrait had been unveiled during a small private dinner hosted by Mr. Harrison Vale, a successful real estate magnate, a man everyone in town believed had everything a person could dream of, except peace. His expression turned to stone the moment Eliza spoke. His hand tightened around the back of a velvet dining chair. He tried to smile, tried. "Miss Hartwell, I think you're mistaken," he said softly, though his voice held a crack no one could ignore. But Eliza shook her head slowly, her hands trembling at her sides. "No, I remember him. I held him. I fed him. He used to hum before falling asleep," she whispered. "His name was Alden." The room fell into a heavy silence. Forks stopped. Breath stopped. Only the grandfather clock ticked. The portrait in the mansion had a different name beneath it. Andrew Vale, 1998-2007. According to everyone, family, community, church, Andrew had died tragically at the age of 9. But Eliza was certain the child she had cared for at the Rosehaven Orphanage wasn't named Andrew. His name was Alden, and he was very much alive the last time she saw him. So why was he on the wall of a wealthy man's home, under another name, marked as dead? And why did Mr. Vale look as though he had just seen a ghost from a life he spent years trying to bury? This was not just a story about grief, not just a story about memory. This was a story about a secret, one buried so deeply that uncovering it could shatter every life connected to it. Because sometimes the truth doesn't stay dead. Sometimes it returns in the face of someone who remembers what the world forced them to forget. But before the truth unfolds, let me say something to you, listener. If you are here right now, it is not by accident. Perhaps life has shown you things you were not prepared to see. Perhaps you too have held pain in silence. Stories like this are not just stories, they are reminders that what is lost can return, and what is hidden eventually speaks. Before we continue, if this story is touching your heart already, take a moment to subscribe to this channel. It helps us continue sharing stories that remind us that destiny is real, love leaves marks, and no truth stays buried forever. And please comment where in the world you're listening from. We have a beautiful community and you are part of it now. Now, let us return to the moment the past came knocking. Eliza's hands were still shaking. Mr. Vale's jaw was tight, eyes dark, something like panic flickering behind the calm mask. And quietly, someone else in the room noticed it too. His daughter. Harrison Vale's daughter, Juliana Vale, stood near the staircase, her hand still resting on the polished banister. She was 23, graceful in a delicate way, with the quiet intelligence of someone who had learned to watch more than speak. Her eyes flicked from her father to Eliza, searching, calculating, remembering. Juliana had grown up in the mansion, surrounded by portraits, trophies, elegance, and quiet rules never to be questioned. One of those rules had always been, do not ask about Andrew. The brother she was told died when she was 2 years old. So young she had no memory of him, only stories, soft, vague, and always incomplete. Yet sometimes she would catch her father staring at that portrait late at night. Not with grief, but with terror. Now hearing Eliza say the boy was alive once, and known by another name, something inside Juliana twisted. Not confusion, recognition, a piece of the puzzle shifting into place. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Dad, what is she talking about?" Harrison didn't answer. He simply said, "Everyone return to dinner. There has been a misunderstanding. It wasn't a request. It was a command from a man accustomed to shaping reality as he wished. But Eliza's gaze stayed on the portrait. She didn't move, she didn't bow. "I know his face," she said again, more quietly now, less frantic, more broken. "At Rosehaven, he used to wait at the window every Sunday. He said, 'One day someone will come for me.' He believed it. He believed so hard." Her voice cracked and she wiped her cheek. Juliana stepped closer. "Eliza," she murmured. "What was he like?" Harrison spun toward his daughter, his voice sharp now, his control beginning to slip. "Juliana, enough." But Eliza answered anyway. "He was gentle, kind, too kind. The kind of child who shared everything he had, even if it was the last piece of bread on his tray." The other boys teased him, called him Charity's pet. But when night came, they all asked him to hum so they could fall asleep. He had this way of making the world feel safe. Something flickered in Juliana's heart, because that description did not belong to a stranger. She had felt that presence before. Not in memory, but in the way the hall sometimes felt full even when she was alone. She remembered dreams from childhood, soft humming behind her door, a warmth, a presence, a brother's presence. Then Harrison stepped forward, his voice low, almost begging now, directed only at Eliza. "You will not speak of the orphanage again, do you understand me?" But Eliza met his eyes, and for the first time in her life, she did not look down. "Why was he given a new name, Mr. Vale?" The room went silent again. Everyone felt it, a fault line, a crack in the floor beneath all of them. Juliana stared at her father. "Dad, look at me." Her voice was no longer soft. Harrison closed his eyes, fighting something inside him, something heavy, old and burning. "Eliza," he said slowly, "come with me, now. We will talk privately." But Eliza didn't move. Her eyes drifted instead to someone else entering the room, Mrs. Marianne Vale, Harrison's wife. Her expression was cold, perfect, controlled, and deeply afraid. "Eliza," Marianne said quietly, "you should not have spoken. You do not understand what you are inviting into this house." Juliana's breath hitched. "Mother, what is going on?" Marianne didn't answer her daughter. She stepped directly in front of Eliza, her voice low, razor-sharp beneath the calm. "Some children are taken away, because they were never meant to stay." Eliza stepped back, a chill crawling up her spine. Juliana whispered, horrified, "What did you do?" Marianne didn't blink. And in that moment, Eliza understood something. The boy hadn't died. He had been taken for a reason powerful enough to bury an entire truth, a life and a family. The portrait was not memorial. It was a monument to a secret, and that secret was about to surface. The dinner was over, though no one had eaten a single bite. The guests were escorted out by the staff, confused and whispering among themselves. One by one, the lights in the dining hall dimmed, until only the portrait remained illuminated, like a witness that refused to look away. Harrison led Eliza down a narrow hallway toward his private study. The walls here were lined with framed newspaper articles, awards and plaques, for charity work, business expansion, donations to children's hospitals. Harrison Vale, the man who gave back, the man who was praised in every magazine profile, the man people admired. But behind that polished name, there were rooms in this house that no one was allowed to open. Once inside the study, Harrison closed the door. He did not raise his voice. He did not threaten her. He simply stood there, breathing, as if the very air weighed twice as much now. "Eliza," he said quietly, "listen to me. There are things you don't know, things that were done to protect a life." She lifted her chin. "To protect him or to protect you?" His jaw tightened. "He was my son, my real son, my blood." The confession came out like a fractured bone breaking skin. But there is more to a life than biology. There are forces in this world that do not care about love or truth. Eliza frowned. "What forces?" But before he could answer, Juliana burst into the study, out of breath from running after them. Her mother's voice echoed angry behind her. "Juliana, stop! Leave this alone!" But she didn't. She pushed the door closed behind her and locked it. "Dad, no more lies." Her voice cracked, not with weakness but with the strength of someone tired of being shielded from her own life. Harrison sank into a leather chair, shoulders heavy. For a moment he looked older, fragile, human. "What I am about to tell you," he began slowly, "cannot leave this room." Eliza crossed her arms. "You already lost that choice the moment you lied to the world." Harrison didn't deny it. He looked at Juliana. "When you were born, the doctors told us you would never survive. Your lungs were weak, your heart was struggling. They said there was nothing more they could do." Juliana froze. Eliza felt her chest tighten with empathy. "Your brother, Andrew, was healthy, strong. But he began to decline around the same time you started to get better. Doctors said it was coincidence, but your mother, she refused to accept coincidence." Juliana's voice trembled. "Mother believed Andrew's illness was connected to mine?" Harrison lowered his gaze. "She believed there was only enough life for one of you." The room fell still. "One child would live, the other would fade." Eliza shook her head. "No, that's not how illness works. That's not medicine. That's superstition, desperation." Harrison's eyes were hollow. "Yes, desperation makes people capable of anything." Juliana's hand covered her mouth. She didn't hurt him, did she?" Harrison looked away, and that silence was the answer. But then Eliza spoke, quiet, steady, with a truth that came from memory, not assumption. "No, she didn't kill him. He didn't die." Harrison lifted his head sharply. "Yes," Eliza whispered, "because he came to the orphanage alive." Juliana turned sharply toward her. "What are you saying?" Eliza swallowed, her voice trembling as the memory resurfaced. "He was brought to Rosehaven in the middle of the night. No birth certificate, no family records. The director told us he was abandoned, found on the steps. But he was clean, he was loved. He clung to a stuffed bear that smelled like lavender perfume. He cried for someone named Jules." Juliana felt her breath catch. "Jules. That's what I used to call myself when I first learned to talk." Harrison stood. "Eliza," he whispered, "did he remember anything? Did he say anything else?" She nodded. Every night before bed, he whispered the same thing, over and over, like a prayer. Juliana stepped closer, tears brimming. "What did he say?" Eliza closed her eyes. "My family didn't want to choose, so they chose to forget." Harrison staggered back, grief crashing over him like a wave. Juliana stared at her father and mother, the people she loved, the people who raised her, with a new and devastating clarity. The boy had not died. He had been given away to save her. Juliana whispered, voice breaking, "Where is he now?" And just as the question hung in the air, a knock sounded at the front door, firm, controlled, as if whoever stood outside had been waiting for years. The knock at the front door was not frantic, not hesitant. It was the kind of knock that carried certainty, a knock that knew exactly who lived inside and what must finally be confronted. The three of them, Harrison, Juliana, and Eliza, stood frozen in the study, listening. Marianne's heels echoed sharply across the marble floor as she moved to answer it. But just before she reached the door, she paused. Her hand hovered above the handle. Her breath hitched. She knew who it was, and that was when Juliana felt it. This wasn't a surprise to her mother. This was fear. Marianne smoothed her hair and composed her face into that cold, polished serenity she had perfected for years. Then, with a sharp breath, she opened the door. Standing under the soft porch light was a man, early 30s, tall, but not imposing. His frame was lean, like someone who had endured more hunger than comfort. His hair was dark, slightly uncombed, and his eyes held that unmistakable softness Eliza had described, eyes that had seen the world and yet still believed in something gentle. He was holding nothing in his hands except a single folded piece of paper. Eliza, Juliana whispered behind her. That's him, isn't it? Eliza's heart nearly burst. Yes, she breathed. That's Alden. But the name felt too small now, too boyish, too innocent. This was Andrew Vale, the child the world had buried, the brother Juliana never knew, the son Harrison had lost, and the ghost Marianne had tried to erase. He stepped inside without waiting for permission, not out of arrogance, but because this moment had been inevitable. Marianne spoke first. Her voice tried to be steady, but the cracks showed. You shouldn't have come here. Alden's face did not show anger, not even bitterness. Just quiet, exhausted truth. I didn't come here for revenge, Mother. The word mother hit the air like shattered glass. Harrison staggered forward, choking on a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. Alden, he whispered, and Alden's gaze softened, just for a moment. The kind of softness that said I missed you without needing words. But then the grief returned. The weight. The memory. I was 8 years old, Alden said softly, when I woke up in a strange bed. They said I had been abandoned, but I remembered everything. Juliana stepped closer, tears brimming. What do you remember? Alden looked at her, and for the first time Juliana felt like she wasn't looking at a stranger, but at someone she had always known in her bones. I remember holding your hand by the window when we were little, he said. You were sick, and I prayed every night that you would live, even if it meant I wouldn't. Juliana gasped, covering her mouth. Eliza closed her eyes as the truth settled over the room like a storm finally breaking. Marianne took a step forward, voice trembling, not from guilt, but from fear of being judged. You don't understand. I was going to lose both of you. The doctors, Alden shook his head. No, Mom. You didn't trust life, or God, or fate. You trusted control, and control always takes something from someone else. His eyes glistened, but he refused to let tears fall. I forgave you a long time ago, he whispered, but forgiveness is not the same as returning. Harrison moved toward him slowly, hands trembling like shattered glass. Alden, I didn't know. I swear to you, I didn't know what she had done until it was too late. When I went back for you, the orphanage said you had already been adopted and moved across the state. They wouldn't tell me where. Alden nodded. I know. I read the records myself. You tried. The pain that crossed Harrison's face was not the pain of guilt. It was the pain of loss. Juliana stepped closer. Her voice shook. Do I have a brother? Alden's lip trembled. You always did. And that was when she broke. Her arms wrapped around him, not timidly but fiercely, desperately, like someone reclaiming a piece of her soul. Alden held her back. Not like someone returning to a family, but like someone who had finally found the part of himself that had never truly died. But as their embrace softened, Alden pulled back, breathing still unsteady. I didn't come to stay, he whispered. Harrison stepped forward, panic rising. No, son, wait, please. Alden held up the folded paper. This is why I came. He handed it to his father. Harrison unfolded it, and the color drained from his face. Juliana leaned in. Eliza clasped her hands at her heart, because the paper was not a letter. It was a birth certificate, not from an orphanage, not from a hospital, from a private clinic in a different state, and the name listed as the mother, Marianne Vale, which meant Alden was not adopted. He was not abandoned. He was not a sacrifice. He was her biological child, the child she pretended never existed. The room went still, so still that even the air felt afraid to move. Marianne's hand trembled at her side, but her face stayed frozen in that familiar mask of elegance and control, the one she had worn through fundraisers, church galas, charity luncheons, PTA conferences. A woman who never cracked, a woman who measured every breath. But now the truth stood in front of her, breathing, alive, undeniable. Juliana stared at the document, her voice barely forming the word. Mom. Harrison's hands clenched the birth certificate. His voice was ragged, disbelieving but no longer confused. You told me the adoption was final. You said there were no biological ties. You said he was someone else's child." Marianne closed her eyes. She had been caught, not just in a lie, but in a lie she had lived inside for years. Her voice was soft, barely audible. "I couldn't go through it again." Alden tilted his head, eyes steady, searching. "Go through what, Mother?" The word mother struck her again, this time not like glass breaking, but like a wound reopening. She sank slowly into a chair, like her strength had finally run out after all these years. "When I had you," she whispered, eyes locked on the floor, "I almost died. The doctors said my body couldn't handle another pregnancy. I was told not to try again, not ever. But I wanted another child so badly. I wanted to believe I was stronger than fate." Harrison stood behind her, his expression fractured in disbelief and sorrow. "You lied to me," he murmured. "You lied to all of us." Marianne nodded once, a single tear falling, not for guilt, but from a grief she had buried too deep for too long. "When I found out I was pregnant, I didn't tell anyone, not even you. I knew what it meant. I knew the risk. I was terrified. And then he came, beautiful, quiet, fragile. I held him and I loved him." She finally lifted her face to Alden, and for a moment her coldness melted into something real. "But when Juliana fell sick, and the doctors said her body was failing, I panicked. I believed what I had been told, that my body couldn't support both children, that one would live at the expense of the other." Juliana shook her head, tears streaming. "So you chose me?" Marianne looked at her daughter, not with pride, not with defense, but with the shattered honesty of a mother who made a choice she could never undo. "I chose the child they said couldn't survive. I chose the one the world already counted out. I thought, if I let you go, Juliana, I would be the one burying you, and I couldn't. I couldn't bury another child." Alden exhaled, not with anger, but with understanding so painful it looked like grace. "You tried to save her. I know that now. But you didn't have to erase me to do it." Marianne covered her mouth, shoulders shaking. Finally the mask fell. "I was ashamed," she whispered, "to admit I chose one child over another, to face what I did. So I told myself you would be better off in another home, a home that didn't have a dying sister and a mother who was a coward." Eliza stepped forward, voice trembling. "But he didn't end up in a home. He ended up in an orphanage, and he waited, and waited, and waited, because children don't forget love, not real love, not even when they're small." Alden closed his eyes. Juliana reached for him again, voice shaky but fierce. "You deserve to grow up with us. You deserve to know you were loved. You deserved a family." Alden's voice broke. "I had love. Not the kind I should have had, but the kind I found. I survived because of people who saw good in me when they had nothing to give. But I spent years thinking I wasn't wanted, that I was something to get rid of, something replaceable." Marianne sobbed at the word. Replaceable. Harrison moved toward Alden with slow, trembling steps, like a man approaching something holy. "My son," he whispered, voice full and broken. "If I could trade every dollar I've ever earned, every breath I have left, every good thing I've ever done, just to rewrite that moment, I would." Alden finally looked up at him. There was no hatred. There was pain. There was love. There was time. Time that could not be undone, but also time that could begin again. "I know," Alden whispered. Juliana leaned into him, resting her forehead against his shoulder. "But, Alden," she said, voice small, afraid now. "You said you didn't come to stay." Alden swallowed hard. "I didn't." Harrison steadied himself on the desk. "Why? Why now? Why leave again?" Alden looked up at them, at all of them, his family who had broken without him, and broken him in return. "Because," he said softly, "I'm not the only one who survived the orphanage." The room went silent. "There is another child," Alden continued, "someone who was like a brother to me, someone who saved me when I couldn't save myself." His voice deepened, urgent, emotional, carrying years of unspoken promise. And he's in trouble, Eliza gasped. Juliana's hand flew to her chest. Harrison stepped forward. Tell us everything. Alden moved to the center of the room, his shoulders drawn tight as if carrying the weight of another lifetime. Juliana took a step closer, while Harrison and Marianne watched with a mixture of fear and anticipation, like the past was not done with them yet, and the future was about to demand a price. His name is Micah Rowe, Alden began. We arrived at Rosehaven on the same night. We were placed in the same room. We shared the same blanket the first winter when the heat failed. We promised each other, his voice wavered. We promised that if one of us ever got out, we'd go back for the other. Eliza knew that name instantly. Her hands covered her mouth. Oh, God. Micah. Her eyes filled. I remember him. The quiet one. The boy who read the same book every night because the library never had new ones. The one who used to tuck crumbs from his bread roll under his pillow so no one would go hungry. He... Her voice broke. He was goodness in its purest form. Alden nodded, his eyes deep with memory. When I was adopted, he continued slowly, I didn't understand why he wasn't chosen too. I thought love was something that simply passed by some children. But the truth was, Micah didn't want to leave. He refused every adoption offer because he believed his mother would come for him. Every Sunday he stood at the iron gate waiting. Rain, heat, snow. Every Sunday. For years. Juliana felt tears slip down her neck. What happened to him? She whispered. Alden's voice darkened. When Rosehaven shut down, they split the children up. Some were sent to other homes, some to group shelters. But Micah disappeared. No record, no transfer, no tracking. Just gone. Harrison's expression sharpened, protective, decisive, the businessman who could dismantle entire corporations with one call. You think he was trafficked? Alden nodded once. Or taken, sold, forgotten. But I never stopped looking. And last month, I found something. Someone recognized his photo. Marianne wiped her eyes, her voice faint. Where is he? Alden pulled a worn envelope from his coat. Inside was a printed screenshot of a news article. Juliana leaned in. Unidentified homeless man found unconscious under I-75 overpass. Condition critical. The picture was grainy, but the eyes were unmistakable. Eliza gasped. Micah. Alden's breath trembled. He's alive, but he's alone, and he's been alone for a long time. Juliana stepped closer to him, gripping his arm with a fierce tenderness. Then we go to him, she said. We bring him home. Harrison nodded, already pulling his phone from his pocket. I'll get my car. We leave tonight. But Alden raised his hand, stopping him. There's more. Everyone froze again. Alden took a slow breath, as if preparing to open a wound that had never healed. Micah didn't just wait for his mother. He waited for me, because I was the only family he had left. I made him a promise and I broke it. Juliana shook her head. No, Alden, you were a child. I still broke it, he whispered. He saved my life once. I owe him the same. And then, just when the room thought it could bear no more, Alden looked at Harrison. And I need your help. Harrison nodded instantly. Anything. Name it. Alden swallowed hard. He was found in Atlanta Mercy Hospital, but they're transferring him tomorrow to a state facility, a long-term psychiatric ward. Once he goes there, his voice cracked, he may never come back. Juliana's heart pounded. We have to get him before the transfer. Harrison nodded. We will. I'll call in favors, arrange transport, lawyers, whatever it takes. But Eliza, who had been quiet all this time, suddenly stepped forward. No, she said softly, her voice steady and clear. Everyone turned to her. You can't show up like a wealthy family trying to rescue a stranger. They won't listen. They'll suspect motives. They'll block you. Juliana blinked. Then what do we do? Eliza looked at Alden, and in her eyes he saw the same gentleness he remembered from his childhood nights. Let me go first, she said. I'll speak to him. I'll bring him back to us." Alden's breath caught, hope flickering where grief had lived for years. Juliana nodded, gripping her hand. "Then we go together." Marianne looked at her husband, her daughter, her son, and the woman who had seen their truth before they ever could. And for the first time in her life, she didn't lead, she followed. The drive to Atlanta Mercy Hospital was quiet. Not the comfortable kind of silence, but the heavy kind, thick with unspoken fears. Eliza sat in the back seat beside Juliana, her hands folded tightly, knuckles pale. Alden sat in the front passenger seat, staring out the window as the headlights stretched along the dark highway, carving a path through shadows and memory. Harrison drove. He insisted. He needed to do something, something that wasn't speaking or remembering or regretting. Marianne was not with them. She had stood at the top of the staircase as they left, her hand gripping the banister like it was the last thing keeping her from collapsing. Juliana had paused, waiting for her to follow, but Marianne had looked away. "Go," she had whispered. "I don't deserve to be there." No one argued. The city lights rose ahead, tall, distant, cold. Juliana glanced at Alden. "When did you last see him?" Alden didn't look away from the window. "I was 8. He was 9. The night before I was taken, he wrapped his coat around me because the orphanage heater was broken. He said, 'If you get a family, don't forget I exist.' And I promised I wouldn't." His voice trembled. "I didn't forget, but I couldn't find him. And every year, I wondered if he was still alive to wonder the same about me." Eliza reached out and placed her hand over his, gentle, motherly, steady. "You came back," she whispered. "That's what matters." They pulled into the nearly empty hospital parking lot. The automatic glass doors slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a dimly lit lobby. The late-night shift, tired faces, quiet footsteps. They approached the front desk. "May I help you?" the nurse asked, polite but exhausted. Eliza stepped forward. She didn't mention money, or lawyers, or names that weighed heavy in the local papers. She simply said, soft and sincere, "I'm here to see a boy I once cared for. His name is Micah Rowe. I was his housemother at Rosehaven Orphanage. He will know me." The nurse hesitated, then nodded. Something in Eliza's tone had weight. Truth. History. Room 318, end of the hall, left side. As they walked toward the elevator, Juliana whispered, "Eliza, how are you staying so calm?" Eliza exhaled slowly. When you care for children who have known more pain than love, you learn to speak softly. You learn to move gently. And you learn that being afraid means you go anyway. The elevator doors slid closed. The ride was silent except for the faint hum of machinery. Room 318 was dim. The curtains were drawn. The fluorescent light above flickered softly, humming like distant bees. And there he was. Micah. He looked older than his 30-something years. Thinner, his cheeks hollow, his hands scarred. His hair had grown unevenly, as though he'd cut it himself. But his eyes were the same. Warm. Gentle. Holding the weight of survival. He was sitting upright in bed, staring out the window, as if watching a world he no longer believed he belonged to. Eliza stepped inside first. "Micah." He didn't turn, not until she said, voice trembling with the memory of lullabies sung in rooms with broken heating and cracked windows, "Hummingbird?" Micah froze. Slowly, very slowly, he turned his head, and when he saw her, his breath broke, his shoulders collapsed, and he whispered, "Mama, Eliza." Eliza's tears fell before she crossed the room. She wrapped her arms around him, careful, gentle, like holding something holy. Alden took one step forward, then another, then another. Micah looked up, his eyes widened, not with shock, with recognition. "You came back," Micah whispered. Alden's voice broke completely. "I promised I would." They gripped each other, fierce, tangled, desperate, brothers in everything but blood. Juliana turned away, crying quietly behind her hand. Harrison felt his knees weaken, not from grief this time, but from witnessing something pure, But the moment did not stay tender, because the door opened. A doctor entered, clipboard in hand. She stopped short when she saw the room full. "I'm sorry," she said slowly. "Visiting hours ended hours ago, and Mr. Rowe is scheduled for transfer at sunrise." Alden stepped forward, shielding Micah with his body. "No," he said. "We're taking him home." The doctor folded her arms. "That's impossible. He has no legal guardian, no listed family, no stable housing. The state has already approved long-term placement." Harrison stepped into view, calm, authoritative, unshakable. "I am his family," he said, "and I have the resources to prove it." The doctor's gaze flicked to him, recognition dawning. "Mr. Vale, I didn't know he had any connection to—" "He does," Harrison said, "and I can provide private care, rehabilitation, psychological support and housing, all documented, all legally compliant." The doctor hesitated, but what broke her resistance wasn't Harrison's authority. It was Micah's voice, soft, frail, but certain. "I want to go home." The doctor swallowed. "I'll bring the paperwork." She left. Silence settled again. Micah looked at Alden. "Home," he whispered. "Where is home?" Alden looked at Juliana, at Harrison, at Eliza, then back at Micah. "Wherever we build it," he said. Micah closed his eyes, relief like sunlight warming frozen ground. But outside the window, the sky was beginning to lighten, and the past was not finished yet. The ride back to Savannah felt longer than the journey to Atlanta, not in miles, but in the weight of everything unspoken. Micah sat in the back seat between Juliana and Eliza. Juliana had draped her coat around his shoulders. Eliza held his hand with the familiarity of someone who had once comforted him through nightmares. Heldon rode in the front again, but this time he wasn't staring out the window. He was watching the road, alert, ready, steady. He was no longer the boy waiting to be found. He was the one doing the finding. Harrison drove slower this time, as if he was afraid that speed might shatter the fragile thread of peace forming in the car. The highway lights washed over them again and again, like waves of time, each one whispering, "You are not who you were. You are becoming." But the peace inside the car existed in sharp contrast to what awaited them. The mansion stood silent in the darkness, every window black except for one, the light in the upstairs hallway. A single, waiting light. Marianne. Micah hesitated before stepping out of the car, his fingers tightening around the door handle. Eliza felt his fear like a pulse. "You're safe," she whispered. "Remember that. We came for you, and we will stand with you." Micah nodded once, but his eyes didn't lift. It was the look of someone who had learned the world could take everything at any moment. Alden placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We go in together." They entered the house quietly, footsteps soft on the marble floors. The air was still, heavy. At the top of the staircase, Marianne waited. She wasn't dressed in elegance now, no jewelry, no silk, no carefully curated composure. Just a soft plain sweater and bare feet, like someone who had stayed awake the entire night, unable to outrun the past. Her eyes lifted. When she saw Micah, her breath left her, not dramatically, not loudly, but like a candle dying in a still room. "Oh," she whispered. Micah froze. There were no words in that moment, just two people who had been connected by circumstances neither had chosen, pain neither had deserved, and years that had carved hollows where childhood should have lived. Marianne stepped forward, not quickly, not boldly, but slowly, like approaching something sacred and breakable. "Your name," she said, voice trembling, "was supposed to be Gabriel." Alden's eyes widened. Juliana covered her mouth. Micah blinked. "Gabriel?" Marianne nodded, tears finally spilling freely, uncontrolled, unpolished, real. "I named you for the angel of protection, the messenger of hope." Her voice fractured. "And I did the opposite of everything a mother should do." Micah didn't move. He didn't reach for her. He didn't shrink back either. He simply listened. "I won't ask for forgiveness," Marianne whispered. "I won't pretend I deserve it. I only need you to know." Her voice collapsed. "You were never unwanted. You were loved. I was too afraid to keep you, and I have paid for that fear every day of my life." Silence spread across the room, like light beginning to touch the horizon. Then, Juliana, gentle, steady, filled with a love that had grown faster than grief, took Micah's hand. "This house has room for every ghost," she said softly, "but we don't have to live like ghosts anymore." Micah's eyes filled, not with pain, but with overwhelm. "I don't know how to be part of a family," he admitted. Juliana smiled through her tears. "None of us do. We're learning. Together." Alden stepped closer to Micah, shoulder touching his, grounding him. Harrison approached slowly, carefully, like approaching a wounded animal that has learned to run before trusting. "You do not have to stay here," Harrison said. "You do not owe us anything, but if you choose to stay, you will never be alone again." The words hung in the air, not a request, not an apology, but a promise. Micah closed his eyes. His voice came out as a whisper. "I want to try." And with those few words, something shifted, not a conclusion, not a miracle, but a beginning. Eliza exhaled. Finally. Her heart eased, not because everything was healed, but because healing had finally been allowed to start. But even beginnings carry shadows, because families don't mend without consequences. And there was one truth lingering in the house still, like an unopened door at the end of a long corridor. What happens to a family built on silence when silence breaks? As dawn crept through the windows, painting soft gold along the floors, someone else was awake in the house, watching, listening, waiting, because this story was not finished yet. The sun rose slowly over Savannah, casting warm gold across the mansion's white columns, the dew on the garden, the silent oak trees swaying like old witnesses. Inside, the house felt different, not peaceful, not healed, but awake, as if its walls could finally breathe after years of holding secrets too tightly. Juliana took Micah upstairs to the guest room, the one that had always felt strangely prepared, like it was waiting for someone who was missing. Fresh sheets, soft blankets, a window facing the morning light. Micah paused at the doorway, afraid of stepping inside, of taking up space, of being somewhere he did not believe he had the right to be. Juliana smiled softly. "You don't have to earn a place here," she said. "This time, the place is simply yours." Micah nodded, though he still lingered in the doorway, needing time to believe something so radically gentle. Downstairs, Alden found Harrison in the study, the same room where the truth had broken open. Harrison was sitting at the desk, but his posture was not the proud, controlled posture of a businessman. He looked smaller, human, haunted. He didn't turn when Alden entered, but he spoke. "I should have known," Harrison whispered. A father should know when something is wrong inside his own home. Alden leaned against the bookshelf, steady, grounded in a way that was new, earned by survival. "You trusted the person you loved," Alden said softly. "Trust is not a sin." Harrison let out a breath that sounded like 20 years of quiet grief unraveling. "Do you hate me?" he asked, not pleading, not defensive, but simply seeking truth. Alden didn't answer immediately. He searched for honesty, and honesty sometimes takes time. "No," he said finally. "I don't hate you. I've spent a long time learning that hatred is just love that doesn't know where to go." Harrison's eyes glistened. "But I don't know how to be your father. I don't know how to make up for all the years I wasn't able to protect you." Alden stepped forward and rested his hand on the desk beside him. "You don't have to make up for the past," he said. "You just have to choose the present, and keep choosing it." Harrison nodded once, slow, deep, like a vow. But healing is never linear. Upstairs, Marianne stood just outside Micah's door, not entering, not speaking, just standing. Her hands were clenched together, pressing into each other so hard her knuckles were stark white. She looked like someone who had battled herself through the night and had not won. Juliana saw her. "Come in," she whispered. Marianne shook her head. "He doesn't need me." Juliana's voice softened. "No, but you need him." Marianne's throat tightened. I don't know if I deserve to even speak his name. Juliana stepped closer, eye to eye with the woman who raised her, protected her, and wounded her without meaning to. You don't have to deserve love to receive it, Juliana said gently. If you did, none of us would have it. For the first time in her life, Marianne's facade crumbled completely. She didn't cry loudly. She didn't fall to the floor. She simply let go of the mask, and her face showed every year of the weight she had carried. I don't know what to say, Marianne whispered. Juliana touched her hand. You say hello. That's enough. But Marianne didn't enter, not yet. Some wounds opened slowly. Some bridges rebuild plank by plank, breath by breath. And then, a sudden shatter echoed from downstairs. Glass breaking. Voices raised. Alden and Harrison rushed toward the foyer. Micah flinched at the sound, gripping the bed frame, the old reflex of bracing for impact returning like lightning. Juliana steadied him. It's okay. You're safe now. Stay with me. Downstairs, Harrison and Alden paused at the base of the staircase. A figure stood in the broken light of the entry hall, rage sharp in her eyes, grief twisted in her posture, hands shaking so violently the glass vase had slipped from them and shattered across the marble floor. But she was not looking at the glass. She was looking at Alden. Why did you bring him back? Marianne's voice was raw. Nothing elegant remained. Alden froze. Harrison stepped forward instinctively protective. Marianne's voice broke again, no longer rage but terror. You don't understand. She pressed her hand to her chest, breath faltering. If Micah remembers everything that happened at Rosehaven, if he remembers the people who ran it, then those people will come looking and they will not stop. Eliza stepped forward from the hallway, her face pale. She's right. I've always suspected Rosehaven wasn't just an orphanage. Children don't just go missing from legal care. Someone was taking them. Someone powerful. Someone connected. Alden felt the room tilt. Micah wasn't just lost. He was hunted. Harrison's voice was calm, but heavy with purpose. Then we will protect him. Marianne shook her head, tears spilling. You don't understand. These are the same people who took him once. They know who we are. They know where we live. They know what we have to lose. Alden's jaw tightened. Juliana's heartbeat thundered. Eliza's eyes filled with fear she had long tried to forget. Micah from the staircase whispered, They never stopped looking for me. And suddenly, the story was no longer about the past. It was about what was coming next. The revelation didn't crash into the room. It seeped like cold water rising slowly around the ankles, impossible to ignore and impossible to outrun. Micah stood halfway down the staircase, his hand gripping the railing not out of weakness, but readiness. Alden moved to his side, the instinctive formation of brothers forged long before they even had the words for it. Juliana stood just behind them, not as someone being shielded, but as someone willing to stand in front if needed. Harrison exhaled, long and steady, the breath of a man who knew that choices now mattered more than regret. We are not powerless, he said, voice firm. We are not victims. Not anymore. Marianne shook her head, her panic twisting into something that looked almost like pleading. You don't know these people, Harrison. They've been doing this for decades. They have judges, foster agencies, donors. And they had silence, Eliza cut in, stepping forward. Her voice had changed, no longer soft, no longer background. It carried weight now. History, witness, truth. But silence is gone, because we are speaking now. Micah's eyes lifted to her like a child seeing the first light of day. Alden placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. We will not hide you again, he said. Simple, steady, absolute. Juliana nodded. You are part of this family, and we protect our family. Marianne covered her face with her hands, not in despair this time, but surrender. I don't know how to fix what I broke, she whispered. Alden stepped toward her, not to forgive immediately, not to forget, but simply to choose the next step instead of the last. Then you begin, he said, one truth at a time. Marianne lowered her hands. Her eyes were swollen, her voice unsteady. Then here is the truth, she said. There was one woman at Rosehaven who knew everything. The transfers, the disappearances. She kept the records no one else was allowed to see. She made the phone calls. Her name was Sister Evelyn Carr. Eliza froze. "I remember her," she whispered. "She was the one who always said, 'God chooses who stays and who goes.'" But Harrison's gaze darkened, not with fear, but with resolve. "Where is she now?" Marianne swallowed hard. "She runs a private foundation in Charleston, a foundation for unclaimed youth." The room went cold. Juliana whispered, "We're going to her, aren't we?" Alden nodded slowly. "We're going to finish what was started years ago, not for revenge, not for anger, but for every child who didn't get to come home." Micah closed his eyes, and when he opened them, they were different, not lost, not afraid, alive. The family did not hug, they did not shout, they did not fall apart, they simply stood together. And that was the beginning of everything they would need, because some battles are not fought with weapons, they are fought with truth, with love that refuses to die, with families rebuilt from ashes. And the Vale family, broken, mended, fragile, brave, were stepping forward into the light. But this story, listener, this story does not end here, because healing is not the end of a story, it is the start of a new one. And sometimes the greatest miracles are not loud, they are quiet. A hand held, a door opened, a name spoken, a family found. If this story touched your heart, I want to ask you something. Take a moment now to subscribe to this channel, not just to follow another story, but to walk with us through journeys of forgiveness, love, identity, and healing. And please comment below. From what city and country are you listening? Our community is made of hearts from all over the world, and your presence matters here. Thank you for listening to this story. You are part of it now, and you are not alone.